Yeah, there was a passerby who come to see he'd come to visit an ancient site in Essex, and he came by where we were filming and said, "I'm not here to disturb, but I think I know what you're doing. I know the story. All these, you must be the lusty vicar." There's always a lusty vicar. I can tell by your hair.
I hadn't read the book before I read the scripts, actually. I read it after and loved it.
Read the scripts first, and then I got it all very short notice, so I didn't have time to read the book in depth, so I had to sort of skim it because we were filming the next week.
I happened to have read it, coincidentally. Hugh, my husband, gave it to me. I loved it, so I was thrilled when it came my way as an actor. It took seconds for me to commit.
I knew of it and hadn't read it. As soon as I read the screenplays, I then sought it out. And I found it, Sarah Perry's prose is so elegant and lyrical and evocative and textured and painted this world so clearly. It's such a rich story that I think is in its own way very quietly rebellious, and it's set in a time that seems far away, but it all actually feels very close in terms of its emotionality and its soul.
A sea creature's been spotted.
Is there something out there?
That's what I'm here to find out. I've done some research.
Into a mythical beast?
Not mythical, real.
The serpent is an invention, a symptom of the times we live in.
So you're against progress?
She's trying to kind of reason her fear away, right? Or a sense of ambiguity or uncertainty, which is a mistake. She does have this kind of irrepressible curiosity that Will shares. And they're both in eager pursuit of a kind of deeper understanding of how the world works and what they mean within it. It's quite electrifying and unusual to find another person who is so equally invested in that searching. I think they're really startled by the companionship that they find in one another.
You let them accuse me. You said nothing.
I'm their pastor.
So you can't be my friend and a man of God.
I can't think clearly when I'm around you.
I won't be blamed for your weakness.
Love is not a weakness.
What was that passerby in Essex? What did he say?
Yeah, there was a passerby who come to see he'd come to visit an ancient site in Essex, and he came by where we were filming and said, "I'm not here to disturb, but I think I know what you're doing. I know the story. All these, you must be the lusty vicar." There's always a lusty vicar. I can tell by your hair.
The performance followed. The hair led the way.
It was very funny. No, there's no competition with Andrew Scott. Come on, no one can compete with Andrew Scott. No one.
I'm on Team Lusty here.
I'm scared. It's in us. We brought it here.
Brought what here? I think we tell the right story. I hope we tell the right story. There's always that fear that if you're playing a character that someone has written or that people have read already, that you don't match up to their idea of what that character would be. So I think as an actor, you just have to make sure that you hold the essence of something that you think is important about that person.
I think I wanted to start acting because I watched lots of period films growing up, and I just thought life seemed much more interesting than period films, and love seemed better, and so that was the dream, kind of. And then when I started acting, I had to kind of just play lots of versions of myself with jeans and t-shirts, and I found that quite boring. And then I got my first period film, and I thought, okay, if it stops tomorrow, then I've done that, and I've done my sort of childhood Like I've sort of realised that childhood dream. So every time I get to come back on a period film, I feel like it's quite special, and there's something very, there's something I really love about it, because it sort of brings me back to my childhood, I guess.
We won't get my husband to judge you, no matter how hard you try.
And then I was quite interested in doing costumes. It's always just amazing to watch, especially on this, the craft that goes into creating characters from a different era and learning about that. And the crafts generally, like sets. This is all very enjoyable. I think.
It's exciting. Period stuff is, as Clement says, there's always a sort of, well, there was for me as well a kind of fantasy of, wearing nice coats and all the costumes and telling stories that were not just the mundane 21st century lifestyle, but that involved horses and different things from a different era. I think there's something very exciting about that.
It always feels hasty, even if you have like a year and a half to prepare. I was so thrilled to have this material to work with and to find myself in this incredibly gifted company. I mean, everywhere I turned, I was working with, yet another kind of extraordinary creative person.
I would just go to the local graveyards at night, dig up the odd corpse, drag it into the boot of my car, drive it home into my garage, and just, experiment with different knives and how to operate, basically. That's a joke. I read a lot. There was a guy called Francis who was a heart surgeon, an actual heart surgeon, and he was on set with us, and he would talk me through the different processes of an operation, the different moments, so when you have to tie off the artery or where you have to cut, how you hold the knife, what you do with the scissors, how you get behind the lung. I read a lot about Victorian medicine and what was going on at that time. Really interesting and gory stuff. Hospitals were not a pretty place back then, and infection was everywhere. I mean, one thing that maybe tells you a lot about that time, although I think this was maybe 20 years or 30 years previous to this, was the bug catcher was paid more than the surgeons, because the hospitals were just full of lice and infection and mice and rats eating guts and, really horrible. It wouldn't be unusual for surgeons or for doctors to have bits of brain and blood all over them, and they wouldn't really wash their hands, and they would go from an operation to operation, and it was not for the faint-hearted.
I was more aware than ever of the extraordinary responsibility that someone like Will has for helping people through times of uncertainty, and to be someone who takes responsibility, that sense of duty and responsibility, very seriously. It must be so challenging to contain the anxieties of so many. And I have no great expertise in the great texts of faith, actually. So that was a kind of a bit of new territory for me, which I really enjoyed exploring, because those stories seemed familiar, but they actually weren't, and it was really enjoyable to excavate them and to read them. And I think it's one of the Psalms that we put on camera at one point, where Will is trying to help everybody, and he says, "Therefore we will not fear, though the waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling." And it's you realise that these words have been around for so long, and we've all been through so much uncertainty, and it was so apt. It was so apt to what we were doing.